In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the Beholder is a large aberration with an armor class of 18, 180 hit points, and an overall challenge rating of 13. It can fly 20 feet on its turn, and has good stats with the exception of strength. It has a +8 to intellect and charisma saving throws, and a +7 to its wisdom saves, as well as having a +12 to perception and a passive perception of 22. They cannot be knocked prone, and they have dark vision up to 120 feet. Their central eye produces a 150-foot cone that produces the effects of the anti-magic field spell, rendering magic users all but useless. At the start of its turn, the Beholder can choose one of 4 cardinal directions to aim this cone. This anti-magic also affects the Beholder's eye rays. Speaking of eye rays, these are the Beholder's main weapons. While it has a bite that deals 4d6 damage, the rays are where it shines. It has a selection of 10 different eye rays that are randomly chosen by rolling a d10, with no duplicates allowed on the same turn. The Charm Ray forces a DC 18 Wisdom save, or else the target becomes charmed for an hour or until harmed by the Beholder. The Paralyzing Ray causes a DC 16 Con save, with a failure resulting in full paralysis. This makes the target vulnerable to all dex or strength saves, and also unable to act or move. They can try to make the save at the end of their turn. The Fear Ray has a DC 18 Wisdom save, or else the creature becomes frightened of the Beholder. The Slow Ray causes a DC 16 dex save, resulting in a target's movement speed being halved, and lowering their action economy by removing reactions and limiting them to either an action or a bonus action on their turn. They can also make the save again at the end of their turn. The Enervation Ray causes a DC 16 con save, dealing 8d8 necrotic damage on a failure, or half as much on a success. The Telekinetic Ray allows the Beholder to target an object or a creature, forcing creatures to make a DC 16 strength save or else be thrown 30 feet, and restrained until the start of the Beholder's next turn. An object can be moved 30 feet in any direction if it weighs 300 pounds or lower, and the Telekinetic Ray can also be used for more fine-tuned manipulations like the locks on doors or using tools. The Sleep Ray causes a DC 16 Wisdom save that, if failed, results in, well, falling asleep. The Petrification Ray causes players to make a DC 16 dex save or else start to turn to stone. At the end of their next turn, they must succeed on the save again, or else they are automatically petrified until freed using a Greater Restoration or similar effect. The Disintegration Ray is pure damage. A target must make a DC 16 dex save or else take 10d8 force damage, which equates to 10 to 80 damage overall. If the target goes to 0 HP from this, they are immediately turned to ash. Alternatively, the Beholder can also choose to target a non-magical object with this beam of size large or smaller, completely destroying it. Finally, the Death Ray forces a DC 16 dex save. On a failure, a target takes 10d10 force damage, which is a potential of 10 to 100 damage in one hit, or takes half as much on a success. This means that even on a success, the damage potential is 5 to 50 damage on a single strike, and if the ray reduces a target to 0 HP, they automatically die. The general strategy for a Beholder in or out of its lair is pretty similar. Keep distance from melee players and use the ray action on its turn. At the start of its turn, have the Beholder move its anti-magic cone to target casters, especially healers. This will hopefully force casters to bunch up with melee players on their turns to get out of the cone, leaving them open for rays on the Beholder's turn, or to one of the legendary actions that happens at the end of their turn. If you want to be really mean to your players, make sure that if one of them goes down, that the anti-magic cone is always looking at their body. This prevents the effects of healing or resurrection spells, taking them permanently out of combat. The general strategy for the Beholder is to keep the casters in the cone and use rays as they come up. Take legendary actions to shoot out random rays at the end of players' turns in order to incapacitate or harm them. If the Beholder is in their lair, use the lair actions to make movement and coordination difficult for your players. Since there is a random element to the Beholder's ray attacks, I'll break down how I run Beholders and then how I would use each ray. Many DMs choose to either roll the rays and then choose targets, or choose 3 targets and then roll the rays. I prefer the former for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that the random aspect of the Beholder is not actually random. They are aberrations, beings of unknowable minds, and are particularly paranoid. Their choices may seem completely random to us, but they're actually part of a very complex plan that players are too mortal to understand. The second reason is that they're insanely intelligent, manipulative, and strategic planners. A beholder would choose targets after knowing which of its eyes it's going to use for that turn. Otherwise, there is zero planning involved and only pure randomness. The best example of why I believe this is the right way to use a beholder's rays is the Disintegration Ray. In the Disintegration Ray, the beholder can choose a non-magical object instead of a creature. But why would they choose a non-magical item for targeting unless they know that they are going to be able to disintegrate it? While I prefer to do things this way, it's up to the DM. It's completely believable that a beholder might think that the best plan in the moment is pure chaos, choosing players and its beams at complete random. Now, on to the rays. I would use the Charm Ray on any low wisdom creature, particularly tanks. If you've been following this series, you know that I love using charms to take away the party's protectors, and a charm spell is always a great way to do that. Note that beholders are incredibly intelligent creatures, and they would know what races generally are immune or resistant to charms. I would use the Paralyzing Ray on either a healer or a ranged damage dealer. A tank is likely to have high constitution and therefore a terrible choice, and taking out a damage dealer or the healer, even temporarily, is never a bad move. I would use the Fear Ray on melee creatures, forcing them out of their comfortable attacking range and giving the beholder some maneuvering space. I would use the Slowing Ray on melee players for the same reason, but also on the spellcasters. Many spellcasters have very low dex scores, and losing out on half of their action economy severely limits their options situationally. In addition, the loss of a reaction like shield or silvery barbs on a wizard can be devastating to a caster that relies on them. I would use the Enervation Ray on squishier players first, especially the healers. Anyone with a lower constitution has a good chance of failing this, resulting in 8 to 64 damage, which is a devastating blow. I would use the Telekinetic Ray for a variety of things in a variety of situations. In a combat situation where players are dealing with something that requires their attention, let's say a door that needs to be unlocked, I would use it to mess up that situation, relocking the door or throwing their thieves' tools across the floor. Other than the fine motor aspect, I'm a huge fan of grabbing a large object or the party's tank and hurling them at squishier players to knock them prone, deal some damage, or put them in harm's way. The other option is to grab melee players and push them out of their effective range, restraining them for the entire round and forcing them to have to move back into position the following round. I would use the Sleep Ray on tankier creatures in the same way as the Charm Ray. Getting the tank with a wisdom save is feasible, and it results in the temporary loss of their protector, and should someone wake the tank, they lose their action and put themselves directly in harm's way. I would use the Petrification Ray on a player that is already paralyzed, as this results in an immediate failure on the save. On their next turn, they can reroll the paralysis save and the petrification save if they succeed on the paralysis. This statistically greatly increases the chance of a failure on one or both saves. And remember that if they fail their paralysis save, they will automatically fail the petrification one as well, and are immediately petrified. I would use the Disintegration Ray on a player that has been giving the beholder a hard time, as well as to destroy cover in the room that players have been using. Like the Petrification Ray, using it on someone who is already paralyzed is a guaranteed failure, which means you're going to deal a lot of damage. And finally, I would use the Death Ray on pretty much any player that does not seem that dexterous, especially someone already paralyzed, dealing massive damage on a failed save and potentially killing a player outright. In addition to all of this, a beholder in lair has its lair actions. I typically use the wall grab whenever more than one player is near a surface. I use the slimy difficult terrain action to keep casters in the anti-magic cone, and the random eye whenever one of the other two is not convenient to use. Remember that you need to use all three of them before being able to use one for a second time, so fire away as you see fit. Ultimately, the beholder is meant to be a massive challenge to mid-level players, and a decent challenge to higher-level players, especially when fighting it in its lair. They are strategic masterminds of unknowable cruelty, and I believe that they should be played as such. This minute mythology is a bit different in that the beholder is not based on any mythology at all. As with most aberrations, one can definitely see the Lovecraft inspiration of otherworldly creatures with alien minds and unknowable goals toying with mortals. However, there are no Lovecraftian equivalents for the Beholder, and it is one of the monsters that is wholly original to D&D. As the story goes, Gary Gygax had a nightmare in which a creature with many eyes attacked and tormented him. He apparently recounted this nightmare to Terry Kuntz, who then drew concept art for what would eventually become the Beholder in the first edition of D&D. The Beholder has been part of every edition since, and is seen as possibly the most fundamental creature to Dungeons & Dragons, and that includes dragons. It has been depicted on multiple covers for sourcebooks, is the current cover of the Monster Manual, and is officially protected IP owned by Wizards of the Coast, preventing its use in other games and media. Multiple canon characters in the Forgotten Realms are beholders, and many modules, settings, and stories focus on them. They also appear in media as homages or little in-jokes. Enter the Gungeon has a monster called the Beholster, a beloved game from my childhood called Heroes of Might and Magic 3 has beholders as evil eyes, and there's even a beholder in Futurama, a grade 11 bureaucrat who desperately asks them not to report his narcolepsy to his supervisors. This is one of the monsters that has truly captivated imaginations and made for some serious encounters. Players and DMs everywhere can agree that beauty is definitely in the eyes of the beholder. That was a very bad joke. If you enjoyed that video, consider giving it a like and giving me a follow. And for more of my videos, you can find me on Twitch at Moglaroo, YouTube at Moglaroo Streams, and TikTok at Moglaroo Streams as well.